Welcome to today's edition of the IntoTexas AI podcast. It's your look at AI news and trends impacting Texas. I'm your host, Shannon Belew. Let's get started. Today, I'm going to continue with a security theme from our last episode, where I looked at Aura, a company using AI to rethink how physical security teams respond to threats in real time. And with the World Cup matches fully underway in Texas from Houston to Dallas, I want to talk about security, but not the software side of things, rather something much more visible: robot dogs. Yes, robot dogs have become part of the World Cup security conversation. For the 2026 FIFA World Cup, Hyundai and Boston Dynamics have deployed Spot robots as part of tournament security and monitoring operations. And two of those robots are actually tied to FIFA's International Broadcast Center, which is based here in Dallas, the global broadcast operations hub for the entire tournament. And this is just one of many indicators that security is becoming, well, robotic, mobile, and increasingly AI enabled. So, for years, most of the AI conversation has focused on the digital tools: chatbots, co-pilots, dashboards, writing assistants, coding assistants. And of course, those are still a big part of the conversation. But we're also now seeing AI evolve, leaving the laptop and moving into machines that operate in the real world. And that includes robot dogs, also includes autonomous patrol robots, drones, even bomb disposal robots. It even includes machines that can inspect dangerous areas, patrol private property, detect anomalies, and give human teams better situational awareness. This is all part of physical AI. And for security, physical AI is not some far off future concept or part of some sci fi movie plot. The robots are already here. And now it's time to start asking, where do they actually work best? Where do they fail? And what rules should guide their use? And that's the conversation that I want to have today. So, Fido and FIFA, let's start with the World Cup. Both Houston and Dallas are hosting matches. And while Houston has gotten off to a very rainy start due to inclement weather, Dallas matches are successfully underway. But the city has been focusing on its role in the 2026 FIFA World Cup for a while now, and that includes security. In addition to hosting matches at the Dallas Stadium, the city is also home to FIFA's International Broadcast Center at the Kay Bailey Hutchison Convention Center. And that broadcast center is one of the major technology backbones of the entire tournament. It's where global broadcast operations are coordinated, and it's connected to how the tournament is delivered to audiences around the world. So, when we talk about security at the World Cup, we are not only talking about gates and fans and stadium entrances, we're also talking about media, infrastructure, and equipment, staff, communication systems, and physical spaces that support one of the largest sporting events, well, in the entire world. And that's where the robot dogs come in. So these spot robots are designed to help with patrol, monitoring, and site visibility. They really aren't there to replace human officers, and they're certainly not making arrests, and they're not independently deciding who is suspicious or roughing up fans. Okay, apologies for the dad jokes, but it's hard to resist with this topic. Okay, in all seriousness, though, the more useful way to think about these dog robots are as a mobile sensor platform, right? They can move through a space, they can carry cameras and sensors and inspect areas and give human operators really a closer look without immediately sending a person into an uncertain situation. Now, interestingly, after video of the World Cup robot dogs surfaced and started circulating online, there was a lot of feedback. And in some posts, they were claiming that they were actually being used for facial scanning or ticket verification. Now, Reuters later fact checked that claim and reported that FIFA and Boston Dynamics, who owns the robot technology and the dogs, said that the robots do not have a facial recognition capability. The robots are being used specifically for asset protection, perimeter inspections, and to help security personnel investigate suspicious packages or other potentially hazardous materials. So, as physical AI shows up more in public, the robots, the humanoids, I think the technology itself becomes only part of the story. The other part is what people believe it is doing. If people see a robot dog walking through a venue and assume it is scanning faces, checking tickets, or identifying people, well, that assumption changes the public reaction, even if the assumption is wrong. So that's one of the many reasons why I think transparency and certainly public education is important. It's not enough to just deploy the tool. The public needs to understand what the tool is for, what it's not doing, and who is responsible for decisions. Now, in practical terms, these machines are usually most useful when they help humans see more, inspect more safely, or respond better to information, right? And that's the central idea behind many security robots. They essentially are extending human reach and they don't replace human judgment. We talk about that a lot, and I think it's really important. At least that should be the model. And this is where the conversation becomes bigger than just FIFA. So, securing the future with physical AI. The security robotics market is growing very fast. And analysts define the market in different ways, so the numbers can vary, but the direction is still pretty clear and obvious. One 2026 estimate, so just from this year, places the global security robots market at just over $20 billion, dollars, with projected growth to nearly $38 billion by 2031, which is not that far away. Another estimate focused specifically on commercial security robots puts that market at just over $4 billion dollars this year, 2026, with growth projected to more than $9 billion dollars again by 2031. Now, those aren't small numbers, and the growth is being driven by some, I think, very practical realities. Security teams are dealing with labor shortages, rising costs, large facilities that they have to monitor and secure, critical infrastructure risks, and more complex public events. And the need to just monitor spaces around the clock is a big part of it as well. So a robot does not get tired. It can run a repetitive patrol route. It can document what it sees and act as a visible deterrent, send alerts, and stream video back to a command center or a remote human operator. Now, that doesn't mean it can do everything a person can do. It can't read the social context the way that a trained security professional can. And I don't think they're really at the point where they can de escalate every situation as well, right? That's still very human centered behavior. And as of yet, it really cannot fully understand that human behavior with the same judgment or nuance or empathy that we can. So that's a huge difference and still a lot of work to do to get robotics to that point. But it can do, some narrow tasks very consistently. And that's where the promise is right now: narrow, repetitive, clearly defined tasks. And that brings us to an important point, I think, that security robots are, there are not one thing, right? When we say security robot, people may picture just a robot dog, but that's only one category. There are robot dogs and agile mobile robots like Spot that can navigate more complex physical environments and inspect areas that may be risky or difficult for people. There are autonomous patrol robots, often used in commercial spaces, parking lots, campuses, or just private property. And those are designed for deterrence, visibility, and incident reporting. Now, there are also bomb disposal and hazardous material robots, which have been used by law enforcement and public safety teams actually for years to inspect suspicious packages, handle dangerous objects, or just go into places where sending a person would be too risky. And there are also drones and counter drone systems, which are becoming increasingly important for large events because the security perimeter is no longer just on the ground. From dogs to drones. Okay, the robot dogs may be getting attention on the ground, but the higher priority robotics threat may actually be in the air. And a drone can bypass many traditional security tools. It doesn't care about a fence or a turnstile or a concrete barrier. A drone can move toward a stadium, a fan festival, a team training site, a media compound. You get the picture. And not every drone operator is malicious. Some may be just hobbyists. Some may be content creators, and some may not understand temporary flight restrictions. But for law enforcement, that distinction is really not obvious in the moment. So consider very recent in the news, right? The plot at the White House that was thwarted. In that case, the initial attack mode was going to be from drones. Now, it's a good but unfortunate example of the increasing likelihood that an unauthorized drone can appear during major events, whether it's a celebration at the nation's capital or near a stadium or fan zone during the World Cup. Now, officials don't know what payload it's carrying. They don't know the operator's intent, and they don't know whether it's careless, curious, or in fact dangerous. So, when it comes to FIFA match locations across the US Attorney's Office and the FBI warned that on each match day, temporary flight restrictions are in effect, and that includes at the Dallas Stadium in Arlington. Now, those restrictions cover a 3 nautical mile radius from the stadium up to, I think, 3,000 feet, and starting 3 hours before each match and ending 3 hours after the match. Now, during the FIFA Fan Festival at Fair Park in Dallas, restrictions are also in place around Dos Equis pavilion area. And now we have a few numbers to share to get an idea of what's really been going on in this area. To date, FBI Dallas says that 18 drones have violated temporary flight restrictions over Dallas Stadium and FanFest during the World Cup's opening weekend. NBC DFW also reported that one North Texas drone operator was federally charged after investigators said he flew a drone within restricted airspace near Dallas Stadium less than 30 minutes before the Netherlands Japan match. NBC DFW also reported that FBI field office numbers show more than 100 drones have been seized around World Cup venues or events where official figures have been released, right? So those numbers include at least 18 in Dallas, at least 12 in Houston, 28 in LA, 21 in Atlanta, and 5 in Seattle. And then I think at least 28 in Miami as well. So not every FBI field office has released updated numbers. So keep in mind that this national figure may omit some of the incidences, but it gives you a pretty good overall view of just how frequent this is happening. All right. Funding security. In regards to Texas, the state has been preparing for how to handle airspace security during the World Cup. Like I said, a lot of time has gone into preparation for this. And there's also been big budgets. Dallas received more than $51 million through the FIFA World Cup Preparedness Grant Program. The city also added about $10.3 million to its Axon contract for drone detection, tracking, and mitigation capabilities ahead of the tournament. Now, Texas DPS separately received approximately $3.2 million to acquire technology designed to detect and mitigate those unauthorized or potentially dangerous drone activity around the World Cup venues in Dallas and also in Houston. Now, that is a lot of investment for a risk that many people probably did not think much about even a few years ago. But this is where security is heading, and that's the point. It's not just guards at gates anymore or cameras on poles or barricades and metal detectors. It is a layered operating picture. You have drones, counter drone systems, cameras, sensors, street level officers, command centers. A lot of public private coordination goes into these things. And in some cases, You've got mobile robots on the ground. So the security robotics conversation is much broader than robot dogs, that's for certain. It's about mobile machines on the ground and in the air, and it's all about becoming part of that security environment and that expanded environment like we've been seeing. So that brings us back to Texas. It's not our first rodeo. When you think about robotics and security, long before World Cup matches kicked off, Texas was actually already exploring security operations utilizing physical AI solutions. One of those examples is actually not a success story, it's a failed trial, but I think it's important to in 2024, San Antonio International Airport approved a 1 year rental of a Nightscope K5 autonomous security robot. Now, this was a large egg shaped robot. It weighed more than 400 pounds. It was designed to help respond to primarily door alarms in secure areas of the airport. Now, on paper, the use case totally made sense. Airport employees sometimes trigger door alarms by entering an incorrect badge number or accidentally opening a restricted door. So, when that happens, someone has to physically respond, check the badge, and confirm whether the person should be there. Now, the idea was that this robot could roll over to the alarm, provide a video link back to a human employee, and help airport staff verify the situation without having to send someone across the terminal every time. So that sounds practical. Unfortunately, the trial did not work as planned. Later reporting found that the robot struggled with basic operational needs. It reportedly had trouble navigating, moving in a straight line, focusing on badges, and even supporting the live video and audio workflows that were needed for the job. So the airport ultimately returned the robot, and the project did not move beyond that short trial. Now, look, this is where physical AI gets hard. In a controlled demo, a robot can look impressive, from seamless movements of streaming video, even talking and going on patrol. But obviously, an airport is not a demo space, right? It's a live, functional, large area. It's crowded, unpredictable, lots of time sensitive activities happening, and obviously very regulated. It's also full of people who are not there to help the robot succeed, right? They're rushing to flights, holding and rolling around bags. A lot of people just trying to navigate security rules and lines. They're walking in big groups and maybe standing just in the way of where that robot needs to go. And that's the real world. And in the real world, a security robot has to do more than move. It has to move with purpose and integrate into those existing workflows and communicate clearly with people, right? It should ultimately reduce our work, not create a second job for employees who now have to manage the machine. So the San Antonio airport trial is important. It offers us a really grounded lesson. And this wasn't a failure because the robot could not move at all. It was a failure because it just could not do the specific job the airport needed and couldn't do it reliably enough. So, navigating to that door alarm, focusing on the badge, supporting that live audio and video feeds, and generally reducing the work for the airport staff, right? Instead of creating that new layer of work. Now, the future of security robotics is not guaranteed by the technology itself. It depends on whether the robot fits the job. And in that case, in 2024, the fit was not there. But robots and physical AI have evolved substantially in just 2 years. The hardware and software they're improving tremendously. Remote monitoring models are improving, life sensors, navigation, and human robot interaction are all moving forward. But perhaps even more importantly, the use cases are becoming more realistic. And that brings us to Austin. In Austin, private security companies and property owners have been testing AI powered security robots in neighborhoods and private property environments. So, a bit different from those big public spaces like an airport. Now, one example that received local attention is a small robot named Palmer. He was used in Austin's Windsor Park neighborhood through a partnership involving CTX Patrol and DAXBot, a robotics company based in Oregon. Now, this type of deployment is very different from that airport trial, right? Because, first of all, it's not trying to solve a highly regulated airport badge verification workflow. Second, it's not being asked to move through a complex public environment like the airport. And third, its role is, well, frankly, a little bit more straightforward: visible patrol, deterrence, recording incidences, and escalating concerns to human responders. Now, DAXBot describes CTX security robots in Austin as 24/7 robot assisted property patrol tools that stream 360-degree video, and they're monitored live and they coordinate rapid CTX response. Now, that's probably maybe a more realistic starting point for many security robots. Again, not replacing police officers, but helping private property owners monitor repetitive areas, document those incidences, and look, create visibility and reduce blind spots. So, in other words, it's a mobile camera with lights, audio, recording capability, and human escalation ability. Now, still, the Austin examples also raise some serious questions. When a robot patrols a neighborhood or commercial property, what exactly is it recording? Is it operating only on private property, or is it moving near public sidewalks? Who has access to the video? How long is that footage stored? Is facial recognition involved now, or could it be added later if not? And what happens if a resident, visitor, or even a delivery driver doesn't want to be recorded? And who is accountable if the robot misidentifies a situation or maybe escalates it unnecessarily? I think these are many of the same questions that we asked in our last IntoTexas AI episode about physical AI security, right? And when it comes to data and privacy issues that are introduced by physical I think these are just real issues that need to be addressed. But look, given the number of cameras already used in public and even private spaces today, I mean, across the entire world, we are already well on our way to dealing with these issues. And, sometimes only after it feels normal, we realize maybe we should have asked harder questions a bit earlier. So, security robotics may be headed down that same path. What are the right questions? Well, I think here are a few that we should always be asking. What is the robot specific job? That seems basic, but it's essential. A robot should not be deployed because it is futuristic, but because it solves a real operational problem today. Is there a human in the loop? For security, I think this is still absolutely critical. The robot may observe, record, alert, or inspect, but humans should remain responsible for judgment, ultimate escalation, and response. And then what data is being collected? Again, that's a big one, right? Video, audio, license plates, thermal readings. There's behavioral patterns. That's a big one, right? I think the public deserves clarity, especially when robots are operating in shared or semi-public spaces. Is facial recognition being used? And this is probably one of the most important questions because facial recognition changes the nature of the deployment. A robot that records video is one level of concern. A robot that identifies people is another. And back to again, how long is all of this data stored? Data retention is not a side issue, it is a major part of responsible deployment. And then you have to think about who can access that data. Is it just private security? Is it property owners, law enforcement, vendors, third party analytic providers, right? The answer matters. Now, again, I want to, reinforce that as we all know, we live in a world today surrounded by cameras everywhere we go. Who doesn't have a Ring doorbell or some version of that at their own homes functioning every day, recording people, right? Again, cameras in parking lots that are scanning license plates. Facial recognition is being used today. So again, these aren't new issues. We increasingly live in this monitored environment that has become our new world. So it's okay that we're going there. But again, as we look at this next level where now it's about security, it's about actions, responses, consequences, I think the stakes just go up a little bit higher. And again, it's something that we need to really take time and consider and define. I mean, just like in business, when we talk about bringing AI in and having governance rules around it, right? It's the same type of thing, except I think in some cases, maybe the risks are higher. So that governance and liability issues, those issues need to be thought about and talked about maybe a bit more than what we've done so far. Look, because again, and this, I think liability is a great example of this, right? What happens when the robot gets something wrong? Every AI and robotic system is going to make mistakes. So the question is whether there is a process for review, correction, accountability, and ultimately improvement. And finally, I think we always need to ask, does the robot make people safer? Or is it just making surveillance more visible? A robot can create a sense of technological sophistication. It can make a facility look advanced and it can reassure some people while concerning others. But I think the real measure should be whether it improves outcomes, from reducing response times to improving early detection of real risks. It's always about outcomes when you think about AI, in my opinion. All right. In closing, essentially, everything that we're talking about is what happens when AI enters physical environments where people live, work, travel, and gather. And it's about making sure that as these systems become more capable, we don't skip the hard questions about trust and privacy, reliability, and oversight. And I think this is also a reminder that technology does not replace the basics. Even with robot dogs, counter drone systems, cameras, federal funding, and large scale security operations, the basics still matter. Barriers, checkpoints, turnstiles, volunteers, communication, and clear procedures. Security technology does not fully replace operational discipline. All right, now a little bit of fun as we close out. There's a little bit of a lighter note on why I think human interaction is still valued when it comes to safety and incident response. And this is a very Dallas World Cup security example because, yes, we can absolutely talk about robot dogs and those counter drone systems. We can highlight all the federal security grants and budgets and bring in very real examples of physical AI and where we're headed in the future. But what happens when a local Dallas pub gets overwhelmed by England fans celebrating a wee bit too enthusiastically, runs out of beer before 10 p.m., I might add, ends up over capacity, and has to close early? Well, that's exactly what happened at the Londoner pub in Dallas, where fans met up for a pre match day celebration that, well, they had a lot of fun, let's say that, got a bit out of hand, and locally it's been now dubbed as the British invasion. So it's a night that many won't forget anytime soon. And I have to admit, as I'm thinking about that event and all of the security, I'm not entirely sure that even a pack of robot dogs or a swarm of drones would have solved this security incident. So, yes, maybe the future of security is physical AI, but sometimes the most human security challenge is still a packed pub, a few thousand football fans, and one too many rounds of beer. All right. Technology and AI can extend human reach when it comes to physical security, but it does not yet replace human judgment, planning, or crowd management, especially when World Cup energy meets Dallas hospitality. I'm Shannon Belew, and this has been another episode of IntoTexas AI podcast. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and please share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.